Hey everyone! Welcome to Amateur and Ancient Literature. If you don't know what that's about, I would suggest watching one of my previous videos, Amateur and Ancient Literature Ask Questions, and you'll find out what this is all about. And if you do know what this is about, you know that we are into the book of Leviticus today, into chapter 4. So Leviticus is a notoriously challenging book of the Bible because it contains a lot of rules distributed from God to Moses. They're really confusing, especially in our modern culture. So I'm praying for endurance for all of you guys. It's been like 2 years since I've read that book. Since then, I've learned a lot of cool things and how the book contains a lot of Easter eggs that point to other cool stuff in the Old Testament and also to Jesus. So I hope that you discover some of those as we go along. Anyway, so today I'm going to answer one question from earlier in Exodus chapter 4. I've received other questions in later this week, but they're just so awesome that I need to make sure I spend my time studying and preparing them well, so I'll get those to you when I can. So disclaimer about the text today, it's a bit graphic, it's a little bit off-putting initially, but one thing I love about the Bible is that it doesn't shy away from that sort of stuff. It's really raw, and it doesn't hide things from the readers that make them uncomfortable or expose flaws, as we'll see in the people and spots of leadership in the Bible, which is just one of the many things that points to its authenticity. So let's dig in. Exodus 4:24 through 26. Get ready. At a lodging place on the way, the Lord met Moses and was about to kill him. But Zipporah took a flint knife, cut off her son's foreskin, and touched Moses' feet with it. "Surely you're a bridegroom of blood to me," she said. So the Lord let him alone. So rightly so, the question is, what's going on in Exodus 4:24? Was God about to kill Moses, or Moses' son because he wasn't yet circumcised? What's the significance of this? Does this have to do with God's prediction about Pharaoh? Alright, so we'll just hopefully hit these questions systematically just as we go along. So the book that was most helpful for me with this was Walter C. Kaiser Jr.'s book, More Hard Sayings of the Old Testament. He also has a book, Hard Sayings of the Old Testament. It's excellent. He's a great, brilliant Old Testament scholar. Anyway, so I used that and information from the Expositor's Bible Commentary to attack these questions. Was God about to kill Moses or Moses' son? And I think the answer is yes, God was pursuing Moses to kill him. If he was going to, had Moses' son continue to go uncircumcised. So the question is why? And we're going to unpack that. So earlier in chapter 4, we see that Moses was just appointed by God to be the one who was going to lead and represent the Israelites as they were led out of captivity in Egypt. So God is leading the Israelites out of captivity, one, because he loves them and he doesn't want them to be in slavery anymore. But there's also a larger thing at work here. So if we remember in Genesis chapter 17, God promised a man named Abraham that he would become a father to many nations, which happened, and that his offspring would come to inherit the land of Canaan, as said in Genesis chapter 17, verse 8. So God made Abraham's offspring heirs to this land that was symbolically flowing with milk and honey, a fertile, rich land. So this covenant made to Abraham was based on a relationship. And so just as we sign a piece of paper for a contract with someone, or when I got married, I had to sign a piece of paper and I got this ring, which symbolizes that I'm married to Colin Haskins. And so that's a representation of the covenant promise that we made to each other. And so God chooses a similar type of symbol that there's a covenant relationship and promise between God and Abraham's descendants, and that was circumcision. So, which, yeah, seems weird to us. But all of Abraham's male descendants were to be circumcised on the 8th day after their birth as a remembrance to this promise. The issue that we see in Exodus 4:24 is that Moses' son was not circumcised. Yeah. So Moses, even though he was born into Pharaoh's household and then became a foreigner in a foreign land, it's likely that he was familiar with this promise and the consequence that's said in Genesis 17, that if a man was not circumcised, that he would be cut off from God's people. So we know that Moses was familiar with this in part because even though Moses married a foreign woman named Zipporah, who was a non-Israelite, a Midianite, her father was called a priest of the Lord or a friend of the Lord. And also, as we saw in these verses, Zipporah, Moses' wife, ultimately was the one who fulfilled Moses' duty in circumcising her son. So I don't know if she knew this beforehand or that was the reason of God's pursuit of killing Moses, or if it was something that she realized along the journey. I don't know. But Moses had the responsibility to circumcise his son and didn't fulfill that responsibility. And that's also how we know that God wasn't pursuing to kill Moses' son, but Moses, because it was Moses' responsibility, not his son's. All right. So anyway, that's about circumcision. Yeah, so when God appointed Moses to be a leader for the Israelites, and actually later to be the bearer of God's law and his teaching, God does that for him in Exodus 4. He shows him that. And then Moses decides to go on his way straight to Pharaoh without first making sure that his family was following the commands of the Lord. And so it was on that journey that we see that verse that says the Lord was about to kill Moses, right as he was about to enact being the representative of Israel. So the best example that I could think about this was, let's say a parent of a child goes to the school board and they complain that the school is not feeding the kids and their kid enough fruits and vegetables. And so they start this whole campaign, and they're in charge of it. They're the representative of it, that more fruits and vegetables should be on the school lunch meal. And you ask other people to risk their finances and all of their resources and their reputation in order to move forward on this campaign. And then you find out that this parent, even though they have the resources to do this, they never feed their kids anything but Cheetos at home, and their kid doesn't even know what a carrot looks like. So it's kind of like this. Moses is about to be like, I'm in Israel, I'm the head of the Israelites, I'm the one who's going to tell you all about God's commands, command that you follow them and obey them, and I'm going to be the representative of Israel, and you guys all have to make sure that you're obeying God. And then you find out that Moses isn't obeying God in his own household. So it's hypocritical. Yep. So the judgment that was pronounced on those who are not circumcised was to be cut off from the Israelites. Yet this judgment of killing Moses seems far more extreme. And why? We kind of just talked about that. Because Moses God was ensuring that Moses was going to lead people with integrity, as he was ultimately going to be the bearer of another covenant with God and all of the commands of God. So God was not going to take this matter lightly. Yet, as always, with a pursuit of judgment, there's an underlying message of, unless you change your ways. And here, by Zipporah's actions, Moses' family turned to follow God's commands, and God relented. And then God was behind Moses in helping him lead the Israelites out of slavery. So the comments about surely you're a bridegroom of blood to me, and Zipporah touching Moses' feet with all of that stuff, commentators agree that Zipporah was kind of resentful toward Moses about acting this out. We don't know exactly why, but surely it wasn't fun to circumcise her own son in order to save their family from destruction while they were on a long journey. So that's part of that. Again, part of the Bible being just really raw and open with different human flaws. So the next question was about, like, does this have anything to do with any predictions about Pharaoh? And I don't think it has to do anything with the prediction of Pharaoh engaging in a vengeful pursuit against Moses and the Israelites, or with God pursuing Pharaoh for his disobedience. I could be wrong. There's a lot of biblical authors use a lot of like similar language in order to draw parallels and connections between different characters of the Bible and different circumstances in the Bible. I didn't really see anything, but I also don't speak Hebrew, so I might be missing something. So I guess to end, just what does this have to do with us today? We're not still under that covenant promise of circumcision. So the Apostle Paul writes about in the book of Romans that when the promise came to Abraham in Genesis 17, it was symbolized first by faith and trust in God. The physical representation of circumcision came later. And today we're offered Jesus as the one who obeyed God perfectly and offers us a land of promise, a land without corruption, without hurt, without evil, and all of that. A world that is renewed. That's our promised land. And as we trust Jesus in faith, the covenant relationship comes with God putting his Spirit in us and circumcising our hearts, removing the calluses of our hearts, continuing to open our eyes to what God is doing. And so it's all God through the relationship with Jesus that allows that promise to become fulfilled. And I'm just a benefactor of it. And I get to participate in it, not because I've done anything by works, but because I have faith that Jesus wanted to bless me and is. So I hope that this was helpful for you, and I hope you stay tuned for the questions that will come later this week. Thank you so much for listening.